Welcome to This Explainer. Look, I want to talk to you today about something we rarely discuss openly, but honestly, it's something every single one of us has to face. I'm talking about the sheer, uncomfortable, and often terrifying pain of becoming yourself. Just imagine we're sitting across from each other in a quiet room right now. Why? Because the things we're going to cover today, well, they're the kinds of truths you usually only learn the hard way, usually after years of stumbling around in the dark. This is how your life disappears. It doesn't happen all at once in some grand explosion, right? It happens slowly. It happens while you're waiting for that perfect moment. You know the feeling, waiting until you're completely ready, waiting until you have all the answers, waiting for an absolute guarantee that you won't look foolish. I see so many brilliant young people standing at the edge of their lives, completely refusing to jump because they want to know exactly where they're going to land. But that hesitation, that is exactly how your life just quietly vanishes. So I gotta ask you this directly, and I want you to be brutally honest with yourself. Who are you when things stop working? When your well-laid plans suddenly derail without warning? I mean, when the job falls through, or the relationship ends, or when the path you mapped out so carefully completely vanishes right beneath your feet? Because let's face it, it's incredibly easy to know who you are when everything is going perfectly. But your true character, your actual identity, that is forged in those moments of absolute uncertainty. Section 1. The illusion of control. When the path vanishes. We go through life gripping the steering wheel so tightly, thinking we're the ones dictating every turn and every change of pace. But life has a way of driving itself. It turns, it accelerates, it slams on the brakes, completely regardless of how tightly you hold on. Take a brilliant writer, for instance, someone who had clawed his way from total obscurity to massive success. His books were everywhere. He was at the very top of the rankings. But right at the peak of his career, he suddenly found himself completely blank. The words just stopped coming. He felt like he was in a total crisis, questioning if his past success was literally just a string of lucky accidents. He wondered if he ever really had any talent at all. It's like the quote says, his inspiration suffered from vertigo in the heights. It left without a single explanation. He realized that even at the absolute top, you cannot control the flow of life. Section 2. Connecting the invisible dots. Looking backwards. If you feel a bit lost right now, I really need to reassure you. That feeling is actually a vital, entirely necessary step. Let's talk about a young Steve Jobs. Long before the billions and the massive legacy, he was just a kid who had absolutely no idea what he wanted to do with his life. He was spending all his working-class parents' life savings on a college education he simply couldn't see the value in. So he made a terrifying choice. He dropped out. He didn't even have a dorm room. He slept on the floors of his friends' rooms for months. He returned glass Coke bottles for the 5-cent deposits literally just to buy food. Every Sunday night, he'd walk 7 miles across town just to get one good meal a week at a Hare Krishna temple. And because he didn't have to take required classes anymore, he just dropped in on whatever looked interesting. He stumbled into a calligraphy class. He learned about serif and sans serif typefaces, about the subtle, artistic beauty of typography. Now, it had zero practical application for his life at the time. None. But 10 years later, when he was designing the very first Macintosh computer, it all came back. He built those beautiful fonts into the Mac, which Windows later copied, setting the standard for every personal computer we use today. He couldn't possibly see that outcome when he was an impoverished dropout sitting in a random calligraphy class. As he later said, "You cannot connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. You have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You've got to trust your gut, destiny, karma, whatever you want to call it. Because believing that the dots will connect down the road, that's the only thing that's going to give you the confidence to finally walk off that well-worn, safe path." Section 3. The weight of success. Dropping the baton. But what happens when you do find your way and you achieve everything you set out to do? Well, achieving your dreams carries its own surprisingly heavy burden, and losing what you've built carries a devastating, incredibly unique kind of pain. I absolutely love this definition. Fame is a spot on the tip of the nose. Everyone sees it except you. Remember that writer I mentioned earlier who lost his inspiration? He realized just how isolating success really is. When you're high up, you become terrified of falling. You start worrying about what the newspapers are saying. You worry when people stop greeting you on the street. You realize how shockingly fast people forget you when you inevitably stumble. Success, if you're not careful, can easily become a prison of expectations. There is a massive, fundamental difference between the heaviness of being successful and the lightness of being a beginner. Let's go back to Steve Jobs for a second. At just 30 years old, having built Apple into a $2 billion company, he had a massive falling out with the board, and he was fired. I mean, very publicly fired.
He felt like a complete and utter failure, like he had dropped the baton passed to him by the entrepreneurs before him. He even thought about running away from Silicon Valley entirely. But slowly, something started to click. He realized something profound. The awful-tasting medicine of getting fired had completely stripped away those heavy expectations. The heaviness of being successful was suddenly replaced by the sheer lightness of being a beginner all over again. It freed him. It freed him to enter the most creative era of his life, where he went on to found Next, launch Pixar, and eventually return to completely save Apple.
Section 4. Life's Ultimate Change Agent, the Final Deadline. Now, I'm going to share a truth with you that is deeply difficult to confront, but trust me, it is incredibly liberating once you actually accept it. We're talking about your own mortality. Jobs used to look in the mirror every single morning and ask himself this exact question. If today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I am about to do today? And if the answer was no for too many days in a row, he knew he had to change something. And look, this wasn't just a philosophical exercise for him. Years later, he had a scan at 7:30 in the morning that revealed a tumor on his pancreas. The doctors told him it was incurable cancer. They literally told him to go home and get his affairs in order, which, as we know, is the medical code for prepare to die. He lived with that absolute terrifying certainty all day until a biopsy later that evening miraculously revealed it was actually a rare, curable form of the disease. But staring right into the cold face of death, that changes a person forever. Expectations. When you genuinely realize that your time here is strictly limited, the immense pressure of what absolutely everyone else wants from you, I'm talking about what your parents want, what society expects, what your peers demand, it all just begins to dissolve. Pride, the ego, the desperate, frankly exhausting need to always be right, to always look successful and completely put together in front of the world. That simply vanishes when you're faced with the absolute end. Fear, the paralyzing fear of embarrassment, the fear of rejection, the intense fear of failing publicly. Suddenly, when put into the stark context of your own mortality, these fears are rendered completely and utterly meaningless. So, the absolutely crucial point is this. They all fall away. In the face of death, only what is truly, deeply important remains. Remembering that you are going to die is the single best tool you will ever find to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. You are already naked. You have absolutely nothing to lose by following your heart. Section 5. Becoming yourself. Helping luck along. Let's return to that successful writer for a moment, the one who is feeling completely out of ideas and out of luck. An aspiring actress and writer had read his book during her darkest times, and she desperately, desperately wanted to meet him. She didn't just sit around and wait for destiny or permission. She actually delivered an empty box to his door, literally an empty box just to create an excuse to get her foot in the door and talk to him. She helped luck along. And my friend, that is exactly what you must do. You cannot sit passively. You must relentlessly do what you believe is great work. Love what you do, and above all else, do not settle. Because just like any great relationship in your life, your connection to your true life's work is only going to get better and better as the years roll on. But you have to have the actual courage to go out and find it. Back in the 1970s, there was this incredible publication called the Whole Earth Catalog. Honestly, it was basically Google in paperback form, decades before the internet was even a thing. Well, when they put out their final issue, on the back cover was a photograph of an early morning country road. You know, the kind you might hitchhike on if you were looking for some big adventure. And right beneath it were the words, "Stay hungry, stay foolish." That was their farewell message. And as your mentor in this explainer today, this is my message to you. Maintain your appetite for the unknown. Be perfectly willing to look like an absolute fool while you're figuring out who you actually are. Either you control your path or fear controls you. The pain of becoming yourself is very real. The transitions are dark, the failures sting, and the uncertainty can be deafening at times. But I ask you, what is the alternative? Living someone else's life? Being permanently trapped by the noisy opinions of other people? Thank you for joining me for this explainer. I want to leave you with this final thought. Will you spend the rest of your remarkably limited time pleasing the crowd, or will you embrace the pain of finally becoming yourself?